I would like to read chapter 23 of Luck and Folly, which is a memoir I wrote about the year and a half I spent traveling around the world with a backpack. And this is the next to the last chapter, which is about traveling the so-called Hippie Trail from Delhi to London, completely overland, which you haven't been able to do since. But before I get started, I just want to ask you something. When I wrote this, it's not my best writing. I just whacked it out. It was like a mental health thing. I just needed something to do to stay sane when I was out of work and during the first months of the lockdown, the COVID lockdown. And also, I just had some stuff I wanted to get off my chest. Stupid things I had done, lies I had told, and just to atone for a bunch of mistakes. Anyway, now that I over it, it's a good story, and I thought maybe I should take the time to go back and rewrite it and do a really good job this time, and maybe it would be worth something. Now, I see I've got a few followers, and I'd like, if possible, to get some comments on whether or not you think this is worth pursuing, whether you have any suggestions to help me. I'm terrible at self-promotion. But I don't know if anybody can suggest any publishers, agents, whatever, or just general suggestions on whether or not you think this has any value as a story. Okay, so then I'll begin. Chapter 23, New Delhi to Menlo Park. I helped with the driving a little, but I hated it. Indians drive on the left, and the van was built for a right side country, so I was driving on what was the wrong side to me and using a steering wheel that was on the wrong side of the car. Then there was the added dimension of the crazy mixture of Indian traffic. I remember Wayne saying, "Wow, you just knocked the cane out of that guy's hand." As we moved across the Punjab plains, the engine started to run hot during the afternoons. Also, everyone but Wayne was feeling sick. Lynda's chest was tight. There was something wrong with my stomach, and Janie was having days when she ran a high fever at 4-day intervals. We were relieved to find that the border was still open, even though India and Pakistan appeared to be on the brink of war. We crossed the border at Amritsar and drove on to Lahore, where we took Janie to a hospital and found out that she was suffering from typhus. Somewhere Wayne met a Pakistani man who invited us all to stay with them while we dealt with our problems. They ran some sort of export business that seemed to be doing quite well. They were very gracious. As we sat around chatting in the evening, we learned that the father wanted to get us in on the ground floor of a pine nut exporting venture. His teenage son wanted us to help him get a record contract for songs he was writing. We passed on both, but the pine nuts might have been a winner. After a while, the women of the family came into the living room and sat with us, mostly in silence. Wayne said they were paying us a great honor by letting us see their women. I thought they were probably just a bit westernized. This then was the Jollies' plan. Janie would fly back to Vancouver and go to a hospital. Wayne would stay behind and take the van to Afghanistan. He would deal with the overheating problem by driving over the Khyber Pass at night. He would understand if Lynda and I chose to find other transportation from this point on. We certainly would. We were dropped at the train station, where we bought tickets to Peshawar, near the Afghani border. The town was dusty and dirty. The next day we took care of visas and bought bus tickets to Kabul, Afghanistan. The bus labored slowly up the steep, winding two-lane highway towards the pass. The land we passed through was barren and rocky. The surroundings looked uninhabited and uninhabitable. At the top of the pass, we got out to change buses at the border. Totally godforsaken, I thought. Robed men on horseback were silhouetted against the sky on the hilltops above the pass. They carried very long rifles that looked ancient. Some sort of old fort topped one of the hills above us. We had heard that this was a treaty road, and that this meant that anyone who left the highway was fair game. We longed to get on the downhill bus, but there was some delay. A short, skinny man with a beard and bad teeth sidled up to us. "You want to buy gold ring? Buy nice gold ring for Mimsab?" "No, thank you." Finally, we got on the bus. We discussed the chances of Wayne coaxing the VW van over this pass and what would happen to him if he couldn't. Lynda said, "We have the Jollies' Vancouver address. When we get back, will you write to them and ask what happened to them? But don't tell me." The descent on the Afghani side was even steeper and windier. We passed trucks struggling up from below. Several of the trucks carried a man perched on the hood, pouring water into the radiator while the truck was in motion. We spent a few days in Kabul. The country was probably safer than at any time since then. Some travelers recommended side trips, such as taking the northern route through the interesting small towns or going to see the giant Buddha statues in Bamiyan Valley. At this point, we both wanted to head straight to Europe. We should have gone to Bamiyan Valley, though. In 2001, the Taliban dynamited the statues. Afghanistan seemed the most medieval and alien of all the Middle Eastern countries we passed through. The women were completely covered and walked several paces behind the men. One day, we were sitting in a tea shop looking across the street at an impressive man on an impressive horse. The tack and saddle were studded with polished silver. I walked over to get a closer look. I exchanged a few words with the man and shook my head. I walked back and told Lynda, "He wants to trade the horse for you." I knew that if we ever got in a serious argument, I could always say, "It was a really nice horse." The fastest bus route to the Iranian border was south to Kandahar and then back north to Herat. The bus ride was hot and boring. The only good part was the large bag of roasted salted apricot seeds we took along. They are like almonds, but much better. Kandahar was a dry, dusty dump. The naan there was good, though. The whole front wall of naan bakeries were covered in loaves of fresh, flat loaves. I watched a baker work a naan oven for a while. The oven had a hole in the top through which the unbaked loaves were thrown in such a way that they stuck to the inside walls. When they were done, the loaves were deftly scooped back out without dropping them in the fire. The only other thing I remember about the town was a clever air conditioning system. One soda shop had a thick woven hemp rug covering the wall facing the sun. Every so often, the owner would throw water on the rug. The evaporating water kept the interior at a refreshing temperature. In Kandahar, we met two young men that we liked immediately, and I traveled with them from there to Istanbul. There was Brian, the Englishman, and Per, the Dane. They both had a sense of humor that lifted us up a notch. Herat was the last town before the border. My vaccination card was out of date, and I went to a doctor to get some shot or other. He was old, and he spoke German better than English. I remember just enough German to take care of my business. I wondered if he had been around since this had been part of Germany's sphere of influence. At the first town inside Iran, we stopped to have our papers checked. I saw that a policeman had pulled one bulky man aside. He removed a wool overcoat from the man to reveal another overcoat, and another. In all, the man had been wearing 5 wool overcoats across the blazing desert. He was an overcoat smuggler. Afghanis would divert the contents of care packages and missionary aid from its intended recipients and smuggle it to other countries, which was illegal. The Shah was still on the throne of Iran, and the country was relatively calm on the surface. The bus rolled down out of the mountains and into the large modern city of Tehran. Many people walking the streets at night wore Western clothes, and the women's heads were uncovered. I think I remember that alcohol was legal. We left Tehran on another bus and traveled across more desert when an oasis appeared. It was a striking sight. The brilliant green vegetation contrasted magically with the surrounding burnt brown. Camels wandered among the palms. The bus stopped on the shore of the Caspian Sea. I was feeling sick that day, but I went for a swim, I suppose just so I could say that I had. We stopped in Tabriz on the Iranian side of the border and took another bus to Erzurum on the Turkish side. On the way, we had a good view of snow-capped Mount Ararat. It seemed like a logical place to abandon an ark. We had to decide how we wanted to get from there to Istanbul. Someone had warned us that women were treated badly on Turkish public transport. So we decided to take a bus or a train. So we decided not to take a bus or a train. Then we heard that there was a mail boat that traveled the length of the Black Sea. It took 2 or 3 days and cost $2 for deck class. We took a bus to a port at the east end of the Black Sea. In terms of sheer terror, the bus ride was in the same league as the one to Kathmandu and the one over the Khyber Pass. The bus driver drove like a madman, careening around blind corners on the narrow, winding mountain road. Thinking ahead, I realized that this would be the last crazy bus ride before we got back to the States. Survive this and we're home free. In contrast to the bus, the mailboat was relaxing and lyrical. We always had a view of the interesting coastline, and we stopped at several ancient cities, some of the towns I recognized from the Bible study I was forced to endure as a child. We passed through the Bosporus Strait and docked at Istanbul. I think 1971 was the last year it was possible to travel overland from New Delhi to Istanbul. A discouraging thought, don't you think?